Daf Yomi is we're recording for the first daf for the first day of Sukkot, and the daf is dedicated for Shemir for the Chayalim, Matzah for the Shviyim, Yeshua for Am Yisrael. Just to note that this is the daf for October in the English calendar, October 7th, 2025. It's been 2 years since we've been dedicating the daf for Yeshua, for the hostages, for the Chayalim. We daven that this Yantif, the hostages be released, the Chayalim be saved. So the Gemara, we had seen yesterday that the Ziknei Darom, the elders of the South, had put forth the astonishing position that when our Mishnah said that if you serve in the temple while you're Tameh, you're disqualified, the service is disqualified, that's only, according to the Ziknei Darom, if it is the Tumah from a sheretz, from a rodent. But if it's the Tumah from a dead body, which is generally speaking a more severe form of Tumah, ironically, it's not going to be disqualified. So the Gemara says, Meisvei, we challenge this idea. The Gemara says, I just want to mention one other thing, that not only do they say this idea that tumah from a dead body does not make you tamei, that does not disqualify the service. They also said another position, that somebody who is tamei from a dead body can, even though he shouldn't do his lechatchila, but he can send his korban to the Beis Hamikdash, his korban Pesach, and can be brought on his behalf and fulfill the mitzvah of the korban Pesach, even though he can't eat it. So the Gemara challenges this position of the Ziknei Darom from a Mishnah from Zevachim Daf Hey. So the Mishnah says in Nesha Amru Nazir v'Osei Pesach, because they taught that if the Mishnah says the Mishnah, Nesha Amru, that they taught that a person who was said about somebody who was a Nazir, and also the one who's doing the korban Pesach, hatzitz miratza al tumas dam. If somebody is a Nazir or someone's bringing the korban Pesach, that the tzitz, the forehead plate that the Kohen Gadol wears, will cause the korban to be accepted if there was tumah of blood. The ein hatzitz miratza al tumas aguf, but it does not affect. The tzitz will not serve as an atonement for the tumah of the body, meaning to say the tzitz will make it if it was just tumah of the blood, but not if it was tumah of the body. We'll look at the Rashi here. Amru. Rashi says this is a Mishnah in Ketzat Son Shanazir v'Osa Pesach, and the Gemara and Rashi says Kosalpa Daitoch. The assumption is at this point, Hai Tumas Guf the Balam Kamer, that if the person is tummy, then it refers to the owner. And the reason why it mentions Nazir and the one who makes the Pesach, the Ushar Karbanos, by all other sacrifices, aim Tumas Balam Posel. The tumah of the owner does not disqualify by him. Osa Pesach, but by the Pesach, Achiloso Ma'akva, you need to be able to eat it. The Nazir Nami, and also the Nazarite, Kishanitma B'Meis, when he becomes tummy from a dead body, Shesasar Niziraso, his Nazirus is ruined, and he needs to go back and recount it. And so therefore his korban is not going to be used. It's not going to be successful. And he needs to recount it. And we see that the tzitz does not even atone for it b'diavad. So this contradicts what the Ziknei Darom said when they claimed that you can bring the korban on behalf of somebody who is tamei meis. Bring the korban Pesach on behalf of someone who's tamei meis. So back to the Gemara. Nesha Amru Nazir v'Osa Pesach hatzitz meratza al tumas dam. Tzitz is meratza for tumah of the blood, but not for tumah of the body. But what are we talking about when it says the tzitz does not meratza for tumah of the body? If you want to say by tumah of the rodents, if that's what we're talking about, meaning to say that the person had become tummy from a sheretz, that we said that the Zikni Durham said you're allowed to bring the carbon for somebody who was too much sheretz and he immersed, is just waiting for nightfall. Elami tumas mace. So it must be that he's coming from a dead body. The katani ain't a tzitz meratza, and it says explicitly that tzitz does not serve as an atonement for him. So we see from here, alma nitmu bailam b'mace. We see from here that if the owner became tummy from a dead body, a mishalchan carbon sand, meaning to say that he can't have his carbon brought, and if he did, he's going to have to bring the Pesach Sheni. So the Gemara says, well, that's not what it means. That's not what our Mishnah means. If the owner had become tummy from a dead body, he'd still be able to send his carbon. What we're talking about here is going to nitma kohen b'sheretz. We're talking about a case where the kohen became tummy from the sheretz. I'll look at the Rashi. Kedetnan, like it states, tummy, that if he's tummy, pasul. Ukimna b'sheretz. And we established this about that he became tummy from a sheretz. The Tanan Nazir Rosi Pesach, who adin kol karbonos yachid. And so it means somebody who's a Nazir or bringing the Kohen or bringing the carbon for a Nazir or Pesach, or any individual offering. If the Kohen was tummy, it's disqualified. But had the nakat hani, and the reason why the Nazir and the Karban Pesach are mentioned specifically is mishum seifa nakat. It's only because of the end of the Mishnah. To buy misnei nitma tumas atahom, because it wants to talk about if he became tummy from tumas atahom, which is this ambiguous tuma, then it will serve as an atonement. The chigmiri heter tumas atahom. And this case of what's called tumas atahom, the tuma which you don't know about, where we learned that it's not disqualifying, that was taught by the Nazir and Osa Pesach Mirlah, the case at Solon. But tumas atahom, tumas safek, it's a doubtful tuma. And the Gemara there talks about what type of tumas atahom. And anyway, it's a halacha Moshe Misinai, the hutra ben Nazir v'osa Pesach, a tumas tahom does not disqualify by tumas tahom, by tumas Nazir and tumas Pesach. So back to the text of the Gemara. What we're talking about that it's tummy, can go into nit the Kohen sheretz, that it was from the Kohen was the one who was tummy. If that's the case, the next clause in the Mishnah states, nitma tumas atahom atzitz meratza, that it became tuma from the tahom, the tzitz will serve as an atonement. Hatani Rabbi Chia, well, amr tumas atahom al meis bovad. But they say that there's only a concern that tumas atahom that are allowed by Nazir and Pesach only if it was a tumah, if there is a concern about a dead body. What's it coming to exclude? We're in the middle of the bottom of 23a. What's it coming to exclude? Bottom of 23a. Lav Umiyute, isn't it coming to exclude tumas atahom de sheretz? Isn't it coming to exclude the tumah of a tahom of a sheretz? It is not that it is not permitted, and so therefore, since Rabbi Chia said that the tumas tahom is only allowed with respect to a mace, but not with respect to a sheretz. So therefore, meaning to say, if it became known that somebody who brought the Naziros or the Karban Pesach had become Tameh through a sheretz that somebody had not known about, then the laws of the Tumah would apply. Now, even though the sheretz Tumah is not as severe as the Tumah Mace, excuse me, and so therefore we should say that any leniency by Tumah Mace, which is the Tahom, should also apply to sheretz. You can't learn out sheretz from Tumah, and that reason is because the law of Tumas Tumah is a law of Moshe Misinai, and we can't apply anything. We can't learn anything from it. So the Gemara is saying, how can the first part of the Mishnah be referring to a Kohen who became tummy from a sheretz when the second part is coming to talk about tumas mace only? So the tzitz affects acceptance if it became tummy through tuma of a tahom wouldn't be possible because tumas tahom doesn't apply. Meaning to say, let's just go back to tumas tahom for a second. The tumas tahom is a concept which says that there's a tumah there, but it's unlikely that anyone would have known about it. For example, a body buried under an avalanche, and nobody ever thought that there was anybody there. So the Halacha Moshe Sinai says there's a special leniency, and if the Nazir completed his term and he brought his offering, and then it was discovered that there was tumas tahom over something he passed over, and we know that he passed over, became tamei, then we're going to say his karbanos are still valid. He doesn't lose his term. And also, if he found that he brought the carbon pesach, we say he doesn't have to bring it another a pesach sheni. So basically, if it was tumah from tahom, we're saying that it still works. Anyway, so back to the text of our Gemara. No, it's not coming to exclude that. Well, miyute tumas tahom deziva. It's coming to exclude the tumah of tahom of a ziva, of a woman who is of a man who is a zav. So that's what it's coming to refer to. But if it would be sheretz tuma, then it would apply. And so therefore the Mishnah is referring to a case where the Kohen was coming from a sheretz. So the Gemara says, but then what about that which Rami Bar Chama says? So meaning to say, according to the Dignei Darom, the tumas tahom applies both to the Kohen and also to the Bayam, also to the owner. So if that's the case, that which Rami Bar Chama says, Kohen amarat b'karbonosayim, huchlo tumas tahom, lo huchlo tumas tahom. A Kohen who brings their karbanos, does the tumas tahom, is it allowed for him or not? Tifsha the tumas tahom huchlo. We should say it does apply. Gemara says the Rami Bar Chama vade pligi. No, for sure they're arguing with the Zikni Derm are arguing with Rami Bar Chama. So the Gemara says, now that we've established that Rami Bar Chama says that a carbon pesach that was offered on behalf of somebody who is tamei from a mace is invalid, the Gemara says, Tashma, can I learn Manasa Aaron and Savona Kodashim. It says that Aaron will, when he has the tzitz on his head, he'll carry the sin of their sacred offerings. Which offerings is he bearing? In avon pigol, if it's the sin of pigol akvar nemer, we know it doesn't apply. In avon nosar, if it's the sin of expire minar akvar nemer, it says it will not work. So if that's the case, so it's bearing the sin of Tumah, mean to say the sin of Tumah, which is allowed for the community. Which Tumah? My Tumah, Mami Tumah Sharet, if it's a Tumah of a Sharet, it's never allowed. Now, a Tumah's mace. The Lav could go into Nidlu Balam B'mace, and then talking about a case where the owner became Tumah mace. And still it's going to be a valid offering. So we see that even though the owner was tamei, he can still send the carbon. Ubemai, who is it referring to? Even nazir. If it's referring to a case of a nazir, his carbon, that it clearly says it's no good. Elo ose pesach. So it must be the person who became tamei. He could still able to send this carbon pesach. So it's a direct question on the position of it's a direct question on the position of Rami Bar Chama. And where it says no olam b'sharetz, the shame tumah b'olam. No, we're dealing with the tzitzit. Rami Bar Chama would say it's atoning for the sin of sharetz. And when it says that there's an exception to the prohibition with respect to the community, it means the category of tumah in general, not specifically tumah's mace. Okay, so now the Gemara says, there are some who have a different version of this discussion. Avan HaKadashin in Avan Makdishim. Well, so don't we say it bears the sin of the sacrifices, but not those who are bringing it? My timer, Ilema Tuma Sharet, and the Ishtari. If you want to say which Tuma is it referring to, if you want to say it's referring to Tuma Sharet, would that ever be allowed in the community? Tumas Mace. It must be the Tuma of a dead body. But Avan Kadashim in Makdishim. Well, doesn't atone for the sin of those who are Tumai Mace. And so we see from here, like Rami Bar Chama says, the Gemara says, no, Om Tuma Sharet, for same Tuma Bom, Tuma of Sharet in general. Now we come to the Mishnah says that the next thing that's Tameh, and much lighter source, is Yoshiv, the one who is sitting. So the Gemara, if he's sitting when he does the service, it's Tameh, it's disqualified. We know on what's the source. Amarapa Amakra, Modu Sharet, you have to stand. Amid Bacharti V'lo Yoshiv. I chose him for standing and not for sitting. So the Gemara says, Tan Rabbanan, Amola Shareis Mitzvah, Kishomer Omdim, when it says who stand, Omdim Ufnei Hashem, that means Shana Lava Kasalachim. It's repeated to say it's a requirement. Amoy Ravo Rav Nachman, Mechta Yoshev Kizar Dami. The Kohen is seated, he's like a non-Kohen, Umachil Avoda. He invalidates the service that he performs. Ema Ma. So since if he's sitting, he's like a Zar and he disqualifies it. Maybe like a non-Kohen who serves gets death, so to the one who's sitting should get death. It's just a prohibition, it's not that. Mar says, and one who doesn't have all the garments and one who didn't wash his hands, there are two verses that come together. And since they both are deaf, and since whenever we have two verses that teach us something, it means that it doesn't apply to any other case. So those are the ones who get death. So if one who says we do learn from two verses, well, drinking wine is the third case, which also for three, everyone says we don't learn from it. And that's today's daf, and we have this concept here just to go over it of tumas tahom, that if there's a tumah that there's no way you could have known about it, and even if you were tamei, we're going to say it was kosher. This is an exemption, a special xeris hakosav of tumas tahom. Okay, we'll stop here, Baruch Hashem.